Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for people to tune in before I get started. And while we wait, I want to encourage people to follow me on Twitter at New Pos Blog. Also, I want to encourage you to follow me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, New Possibilities. I encourage you all to follow that page. And if you are interested in reading great books, I encourage you to follow our book club, Reading as Activism. We meet on the last Saturdays of each month. We meet through Zoom. When this pandemic ends, we'll probably have meetings in person as well, as we used to do in the past. So we meet on the last Saturdays of each month, and we meet at 1 o'clock. If you are interested in being a part of the book club, please let me know. You can email me at newpossibilities@yahoo.com, or you can leave a message on the Facebook page, like the Facebook page, and let me know, and I'll make sure that you get the invites for our book club. So my book club, again, is called Reading as Activism. And we read a different book each month. And if you like the Facebook page, you will receive a notice on your news feed of our next book. The book that we're going to be reading next is a book by Trevor Noah entitled Born a Crime. So that's the next book that we're going to read. So I encourage people to like that page. We read great books by Black authors throughout the diaspora, talking about the Black experience. We also read some books by other authors as well, but our books always deal with the plight of Black people worldwide. So I encourage people to like that page and to, attend the book club meetings. If you enjoy great dialogue about great books dealing with our people, I encourage you to follow our book club. The other thing I'll say is this. I have recently started reading Native Son by, this great book. Hold on one second. So recently I started reading Native Son by Richard Wright. If you are interested in talking about that book, just let me know. And I'm probably going to do a live stream or a video reviewing that book. It's a classic, and I'm sure by now most people have read it. But this is the book that we're going to be reading for the book club. Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. That book has received great reviews. It's on the New York Best Times seller list. So I encourage you all to join the book club. But I want to thank you all for tuning in. There are a lot of things that I want to talk about today. And, I appreciate people for tuning in. Shout out to Elaine. I see you there. So this first story that I want to talk about deals with Stacey Dash. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. And please let me know if there are any buffering issues or anything of that nature. Okay, so you all see this article, and I'm sure by now you all have heard about this story. Stacey Dash has issued an apology for past statements that she's made. She's made a lot of controversial statements about Black people, about racism and all that kind of stuff. And I want to deal with it, and I want to just talk about this whole concept of her apologizing for, her past. So first, I'm going to read an excerpt from this article right here from the Griot. In this article, she did an interview. It talks about how she did this interview with Daily Mail TV on this past Wednesday. And basically during this interview, she said that Fox News tried to cast her as the angry Black woman conservative. And she said that there are things that I'm sorry for, things that I did say that I should not have said them the way I said them. And that's a photo of Stacey Dash. And she said, I realized in 2016 that anger is unsustainable and it will destroy you. I made a lot of mistakes because of that anger. She said, there are things that I'm sorry for, things that I did say that I should not have said them the way that I said them. They were very arrogant and prideful and angry. And that's who Stacey was, but that's not who Stacey is now. Stacey's someone who has compassion, empathy. And then this article goes on to talk about how she was actually suspended from Fox News in 2015 for using profanity in reference to then President Obama while on the air. And, this article goes on to say some other things about how she this is some of her controversy in the past. And I'm going to go into it a little bit more detail, how she co-signed Trump's statements following that riot that happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and talk about some of the other controversial things that she has said. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, so that's it for that article. So she's seeking an apology now, and I just think that comes at a convenient time for her, and I'll get into that a little bit later. First, I want to run through some of the controversial things that this woman has said in the past. So this first thing that we touched on for a second dealt with Donald Trump's statements about the Charlottesville riots. And you all know what he said. He basically said there were some very fine people on both sides and all that kind of stuff. He basically referred to these racists, these white supremacists, these damn terrorists as some very fine people. And we will recall what happened during that Charlottesville incident. You had a gathering of all these white supremacist groups. And during that gathering, it basically turned into a riot. You had a man use his car to ram into a crowd of people. He killed one activist, injured some others. And during that Charlottesville riot, people were attacked, people were beaten. A black man was beaten to the point where his head was pouring with blood. And these people were chanting racist and white supremacist slogans during this whole rally in Charlottesville. It was a spectacle for the nation. And the whole rally was about defending racist Confederate symbols. That's what they were there for. But Donald Trump referred to that as referred to those people that participated in that white supremacist riot as some very fine people. And you had this buck dancing, bootlicking, tap dancing coon, Stacey Dash, actually defend Donald Trump's statement about these white supremacists. And this is what she said. She said, I think he's absolutely right. There were two extreme sides. And here's what it boils down to our right. They had a right to assemble. Both sides had a right. They both were, but they were both extremes. And, so she's basically trying to equate these two different sides where you have one side of people fighting against racism and you had another side defending racism. And you had this woman, Stacey Dash, basically trying to say that these sides were morally equivalent, that they both were extreme and all that kind of stuff, which is absolutely ridiculous. So that's one example of this woman making these ridiculous, controversial statements. And then I have a couple of other articles here that I want to show you about other things that she has said and done and stuff. We know that in 2012 she supported Mitt Romney, and that's not as controversial as some of the other things. I don't have any problem with somebody being a conservative and deciding to vote for a Republican and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that makes this kind of different is that Obama was the first African American president, the first black president. And I know people may go back and forth about whether he was African American or not, but the first black president. But you had this woman support a conservative over the first black president. And that in and of itself is controversial. And then she's made statements. I'm going to just go to some of the most controversial statements, some of the most controversial statements that she made. So Stacey Dash also said that Obama didn't give a shit about terrorism. She criticized him in that way. And then she also said that Black History Month should be canceled. That's one of the statements that she made. She went on to say, either we want to have segregation or integration. If we don't want segregation, then we need to get rid of channels like BET and the BET Awards and the NAACP Image Awards, where you're only awarded if you're Black, which is not even true. If it were the other way around, we would be up in arms. It's a double standard. There shouldn't be a Black History Month. We're Americans, period. So that's one of the things that she said that was absolutely ridiculous. The only reason, Black History Month is necessary because our history has been blotted out, because our history has been covered over, because our history has been omitted and stripped from the history books, because we have been deprived of a knowledge of ourselves and our history. All we're taught about is that our history began as slaves. Too often, even with Black History Month, all we're taught about is, just the civil rights movement and all that kind of stuff. We're not taught about how great of a people we were, about the accomplishments of African people. We are always told about the greatness of all these other people, the greatness of, Greece and Europe and, other parts of Europe like Britain and France and all that kind of stuff. And we're taught these lies that the Egyptians were white people and all that kind of stuff. Everything has been taught in such a way to perpetuate the cycle of white supremacy. And Black History Month is not saying that our history is limited to 1 month in a year. It's about us gaining knowledge of self so that we can liberate ourselves, free ourselves, and have the pride and the dignity and self-respect that we need in order to be successful and to thrive in this society. Also, it's a time for the larger society to be educated as well about the accomplishments of Black people, because too often, not only are Black people miseducated, but the overwhelming majority of the population is miseducated when it comes to Black people. They're taught all these lies and they're fed all these negative images of Black people, where people begin to think that being Black means being a criminal and stuff. So that's why you still need a Black History Month, so that we can have the knowledge of ourselves, so that the larger society can understand our contribution as well. Also, she basically said that these award shows need to be gotten rid of and all that kind of stuff, which is ridiculous, because for the longest time, the mainstream award programs, the white dominated award shows and programs have marginalized Black people, have overlooked Black people, have passed over Black people, and denied, recognizing the accomplishments of our people. So we had to do for self and create our own. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you had this woman, this Aunt Jemima tap dancing Negro, basically say that those things weren't necessary anymore, and suggested that that's a form of segregation, suggested somehow that Black people are at fault when Black people are responding to a system that has locked them out, that has locked us out as a people. So that's one of the things that she said, one of the controversial statements that she made. And then she also made a statement about Black people being uneducated. And hopefully I'll be able to find that quote as well. But then she called this brother, she also called the brother Jesse Williams a Hollywood plantation slave. And this came after he received a BET award for all of his social justice work, and he gave this powerful speech at the award program, and this woman had the nerve to call him a slave. And I don't know how the hell somebody can call somebody a slave, this fighting, using their voice, using their fame to bring attention to the issue of police brutality, using their funds to support the movement that's in the streets fighting against police brutality. But this is what this woman did. The typical thing that the coon does. The coon is trotted out to attack their own people. The coon is used as a buffer and as a mouthpiece of white supremacy. And that's what happened with the Stacey Dash person. And now all of a sudden she expects people to forgive everything that she said, everything that she's done with respect to the Black community. And I'm not going for that shit. I'm sorry, I'm just not. And I'll get into it a little bit later. And she's made other statements, and I won't get into those. I'm going to try to find a statement that she made about Black people being uneducated. Yeah, so I think this is it. She drew, as this article points out, it says she drew criticism for claiming that Obama's policies made Black people uneducated and left them feeling worthless. This is what she said. She said it keeps them stuck. They're getting money for free. They feel worthless. They're uneducated. I mean, as long as you are that way, they keep you under their control. They have a plantation mentality. As long as you give this much money, you'll stay right there. You don't need to know too much, because if you do, you might start thinking for yourself. So, I mean, this is another thing with these conservatives, like a lot of these Black so-called conservatives, they constantly find this need to attack and demonize their own people. This woman is suggesting that Black people are worthless or Black people are uneducated. And she's suggesting that this brother, President Obama, policies help perpetuate this stuff, when a lot of his policies benefited the Black community. And I could go on and on about how his policies benefited the Black community, because I know that you even have some of these so-called woke people that say this stuff, but it's nonsense. There are plenty of ways that Obama's policies have benefited Black communities. Even on the issue of education, it was the Obama administration that defended affirmative action. In the case of Fisher versus the University of Texas, that was the Obama administration doing that. It was the Obama administration defending voting rights in Shelby County versus Holder. In so many cases, it was the Obama administration that aggressively investigated various police departments and entered consent decrees to end a lot of these discriminatory policing practices. So this idea that Obama didn't do anything for Black people is ridiculous. This idea that he was promoting a plantation mentality is ridiculous. Also, the Obama administration passed an executive order dealing with Black excellence in education. So this woman doesn't know what she's talking about. This woman is, again, perpetuating these negative stereotypes about Black people. So she expects people to forget about all this stuff she said and done when it comes to the Black community. let's see if there's some other points that I want to highlight before I go on to my final comments about this. Yeah, so I'll just stop right there. I think that's enough plenty of examples of Stacey Dash and there's some of the things that she has said. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick. So, some people will say, well, she should be forgiven. She decided not to, she's seeking forgiveness. She's turned over a new leaf. She's going to be a better person and all that kind of stuff. And this is what I have to say in response to that. There have to be consequences for cooning. There have to be consequences for people betraying the Black community. People that are traitors need to be dealt with. And we know that nations have ways of dealing with traitors. Traitors get incarcerated. Traitors in some places get killed. And the most that we can do is socially ostracize people like this. Her her apologizing for things that she has said in the past is an apology of convenience. She's doing it at a time after Trump has been, after Trump lost the election, after he's gone, when it's no longer convenient or no longer as profitable to have these Negro talking pieces and stuff like that. This is all about convenience. She's doing it after she lost her job at Fox News. So this is all about convenience. I don't think that this is sincere at all. And I think that this is the kind of woman that will do and say anything to advance her career. She saw that there was a niche for these coons and these so-called conservative, Black conservatives, and she ran with it. She used it as a means to fill her pocket. And after taking these coins to sell out, after taking pieces of silver like Judas, all of a sudden she thinks that Black people are going to forgive and forget. And my thing is like, to hell with that. We have to take a hard line against these people. We have to make examples of these people. Otherwise, people will take the Black community as a joke. They will think that they can come and go as they please. They will think that they can betray the community and still be in the good graces of the community. And that's part of the reason why we have so many traitors in our community, because there are no consequences for being a traitor, for being a sellout. Often these people are rewarded for selling out the Black community. They're rewarded with book deals. They're rewarded with television shows. Just ask Candace Owens. That's what happens to these people. And we have to be the ones to penalize these people. We cannot accept this kind of betrayal in our community. At the very least, this woman needs to repent with action, with action to make amends for all the things that she has said and done with respect to the Black community before we should even be thinking about accepting an apology from her or welcoming her back into the Black community. Yeah, so that's what I had to say about that. Shout out to everyone in the chat. I appreciate you all for tuning in. So the next story I want to go to is this story about South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. So just bear with me a second. Hopefully you all can hear everything. There's no buffering. I hope so. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. So I've been seeing these articles about Tim Scott, and he basically appeared on, I think it was Fox News. And this article is just somebody's commentary. I thought it was going to be an article that has like, the actual substance of what he said, but I'm going to try to pull it up so I can have it word for word. So if you can just bear with me a second. Just bear with me 1 second. I just want to make sure that I have the exact quote.
Our strength. This is the new nice.
Okay, so I'm going to play this segment from this Fox News program, and you should hear, you'll be able to hear Tim Scott. And for YouTube's sake, this is fair use. It's not copyright infringement. So don't try to flag me for this. All right, so let me play this. Hopefully this is the segment.
Immigration and diversity is our strength as a country. Diversity is our strength, she says. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Diversity is our strength. This is the new Nicene Creed. Don't ask what it means. That's not your place. Just mouth the words. Well, there's nothing liberal about any of this, obviously. It is purely authoritarian, woke fascism.
All right, so that was the segment where you had, that was the segment leading up to Tim Scott's comments. So let me go to exactly what Tim Scott said. Tim Scott said, woke supremacy is just as bad as white supremacy. We need to take that seriously. And then he went on he read a verse from the Bible, Matthew 5:44, which teaches about loving one's enemies. So that's basically what he was talking about. I mean, because you have all these controversies about political correctness and all that stuff. So this guy is saying that woke supremacy is so-called woke supremacy is just as bad as white supremacy, which is absolutely ridiculous. And this is why, these kind of statements and all those statements that I read about, from Stacey Dash and stuff like this, those are the reasons why nobody takes Black conservatives seriously. That's why hardly anybody in the Black community listens to these people or has any kind of respect for these people. Here you have a man comparing consciousness or people having political correctness. He is comparing that to white supremacy, which is absolutely ridiculous. White supremacy is slavery. White supremacy was Black people being sold as property, was Black people being beaten and raped and burned alive because of the color of their skin. The last time I checked, there is no such thing as no woke supremacy. Nobody's being enslaved as a result of so-called woke supremacy. Nobody's being beaten or raped because of so-called woke supremacy. And then when we look at the history of lynchings in this country, this is white supremacy. This is what white supremacy looks like. Black people being strung up and becoming the strange fruit that Billie Holiday was singing about. But this man wants to compare a movement that's about consciousness, about fighting police brutality, about dealing with racism. He wants to compare that to white supremacy. This is what white supremacy looks like. Black bodies being burned, Black people being burned alive. And you see all these people gathered as if this is some kind of sporting event. They brought their children, and that's a Black man hanging up there. They brought their children to witness this, as if they were going to a baseball game or a basketball game or a football game. That's how they saw the treatment of Black people. They were entertained by torture of Black people. Last time I checked, woke people didn't lynch anybody. They didn't burn anybody. They didn't have any gatherings where they celebrated the death of Black people. And these people, not only did they lynch Black people and stuff, they were proud of it. Here they are in a picture showing their faces for the whole world to see. And they used to sell postcards. That is white supremacy. So-called woke supremacy doesn't exist, first of all. And there's no example of woke people doing anything anywhere near comparable to this kind of terrorism that Black people experienced at the hands of these white supremacists, at the hands of groups like the Ku Klux Klan and other terrorist groups in this country. This is what white supremacy looks like. This cop with his knee in a Black man's neck for over 8 minutes while he's saying, I can't breathe. White supremacy is a system. It's a system that segregated Black people for decades. First it enslaved Black people for hundreds of years, then segregated Black people, subjected Black people to humiliation and degradation, oppression. And that system continues today in these modern manifestations of police brutality, of failing schools, of the massive wealth gaps between Black people and white people. But yet and still, you had this book dancing Uncle Ruckus Negro talking about some woke supremacy, which doesn't even exist, is just as bad as white supremacy, which is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I just had to bring that to your attention. And, speaking of this George Floyd case, there are some developments in that case that I want to briefly talk about as well. So let's get to that. That'll be the last segment. And then I'll look at your comments and see if there's anything we can discuss further. There's been a major development in the George Floyd case. As many of you probably already know, a settlement has been reached, as pointed out in this article from BuzzFeed. It says that the city of Minneapolis agreed to pay $27 million to George Floyd's family to settle the wrongful death lawsuit that was filed last July. That's a great thing for the family. It's great that the family will be compensated for their loss. It's an achievement for the attorneys and stuff like that. But make no mistake about it, that is an individual solution. That doesn't deal with the problem of racial profiling as a system. That doesn't deal with the problem of police brutality. That doesn't end police brutality. That doesn't change any of the practices of police brutality. That is just a settlement for the family. And so I'm going to go into this, see if there's any more to it in here. So it says that 500,000 will be for the benefit of the community. So I'm just trying to see if there's anything about dealing with systemic racism. Okay, and it also mentions a prior settlement. So according to this article, as I said before, there's nothing dealing with the systemic racism. There's nothing changing policing practices. That is compensation for the family. And that is a form of justice, but that is not complete justice. When these officers are locked up for killing this brother, that will be justice. When you have reforms in a police system so that nothing like this will ever happen again, that's what justice looks like. this is only a small step toward justice. And we know that the way these cases work out, the attorneys receive like at least a third of the settlement. So that's 9 million, at least 9 million for the attorneys. And then, the rest is for the family. Then you have taxes. In the big scheme of things, like, is that enough to compensate a family for the loss of their loved one? Is that enough to compensate the family for having to witness their loved one being basically suffocated to death, choked to death, where this brother is crying out, saying he can't breathe, and this pig keeps his knee in this brother's neck, despite his cries and pleads for help, despite cries out from the audience, from the people surrounding the area, asking the cop to stop doing it. But he continued to choke this brother out with his knee, to the point where this brother was crying out for his mother. Is this enough to compensate the family for that? It's a step forward, but it's not complete justice. And we should remain vigilant. And I will continue to discuss this case. And for people that don't know, the case is going to trial now. They've started the trial. They've started jury selection and all that kind of stuff. I don't know the full details. I don't know if the jury has been impaneled yet, if they have the full jury yet. Another development in the case is this. The judge in the case decided to reinstate the third-degree murder charge against the officer. And that's significant because, that gives the jury more options. You had the second-degree murder charges and other charges as well. So let me just go through the article, and it probably points out all that. So it says that he had already faced charges of second-degree unintentional murder and second-degree manslaughter. So now they added this third charge, which will make it, give the jury more options to make sure that he is convicted. Well, it's not to make sure that he's convicted. It's to give them options, and it makes it a little bit easier for there to be a conviction in this case. So I think that is a positive development, and I will continue to follow the case. I just hope and pray that there is justice for this brother and his family. I hope that these officers are held accountable and punished to the full extent of the law. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to see what you all are saying before I close out. I want to thank you all for tuning in. So I'm just looking through your comments right now. So, yeah, so John Pro made an interesting comment. He said, the Floyd case is tragic, but Benjamin Crump is a shady ambulance chaser who's out to get paid. Yeah, I mean, first of all, like most attorneys, they're going to try to take cases that they can get paid for. But I think that there is something to that. I mean, I'm not going to say that he's a bad person or anything like that. He's done a lot. He's brought attention to a lot of very important cases, and he's received, helped families receive settlements in their cases, which is a great thing. But it does create this ambulance chaser type of narrative when you have every single major police case, police brutality case, he's always the lead counsel. You mean to tell me in this whole nation that this one man is the only attorney that's qualified to represent these families? I think that there's something to that. Like, it creates the perception that this man is profiting off of the death of Black people at the hands of these cops. So I get that. And then in a lot of these cases, sadly, what happens is, while the family receives a settlement, too often the police in a lot of these cases that he's involved in, end up walking. And I know that he's not the prosecutor. He's not the one that's bringing the prosecution against the officers. He's not the one, representing the state or the people in those cases. So I understand why people will say, well, he can't be held accountable for what the prosecutor does. But it just creates a perception that every case that he's involved in, he gets money, the family gets money, but the officers do not get punished for the crimes that they have committed against these victims of police brutality. So I hear what you're saying. I'm not going to condemn the brother, but I hear what you're saying, and I understand your point. So yeah, shout out to everyone. Yeah, so Renaissance man made a great point about Obama expanding Pell Grants. He said, so how is that keeping Black people uneducated? Exactly. Pell Grants make it possible for people to get a college education. People that from low-income households are able to get grants to pay for their education. When I went to college, I received a Pell Grant. That made it possible for me to get a college education. And also, as I said before, Obama defended affirmative action, a program that makes it possible for many African Americans to have an opportunity to go to college, to go to graduate school, to become doctors, lawyers, and other professionals. So yeah, it's like, Stacey Dash didn't know what she was talking about. Like, she's just a pretty face that, these conservatives use to as a mouthpiece of white supremacy, as a mouthpiece to justify their positions on a lot of issues when it comes to Black people. I don't understand how any Black person can be a so-called conservative or Republican in these days and times, when it's the Republicans that are trying to suppress the Black vote, when it's the Republicans that are attacking affirmative action, when it's the Republicans that are attacking these social programs that benefit Black communities, programs like Head Start, programs such as the Affordable Care Act that has made it possible for more African Americans to receive health care than ever before. So let me continue on through your comments. Just let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Shout out to Def Rocker. Thanks for tuning in. So somebody said Obama could have made college tuition free. I mean, first of all, I just think that that's a perception. It's just not connected with political reality. A lot of the things that Obama tried to push were being blocked by Republicans. This is not a monarchy. This is not a dictatorship where one man can decide what the law will be. So this idea that Obama was going to magically make college tuition free is just absurd. And it just, it suggests that it negates all these other great things that Obama did around education that I talked about earlier before. So, with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please rate, comment, subscribe, support this channel. Encourage your friends to subscribe to my channel. Hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. Peace and blessings. Have a great day.